Good afternoon. The Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement is calling this virtual hearing back from recess. It's 2 p.m. Friday, November 6, 2020. Notice of this afternoon's virtual hearing, excuse me, had a phone call. Notice of this afternoon's virtual hearing was provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and the local media on October 29, 2020 for the 5-day notice and November 4th, 2020 for the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of open government law. I'd like to acknowledge the senators that have joined me here today, Senator Regine Visco-Lee and Senator Tello Taitigui Masi. The purpose of this virtual public hearing is to receive testimony on Bill number 405-35, COR, sponsored by Senator Regine Visco-Lee. It's an act relative to establishing a task force to explore the feasibility of creating a groundwater conservation area on select government of Guam properties which overlay a portion of the Northern Guam Lands Aquifer, NGLA, wherein no production wells shall be installed and no development shall occur. The second item on the agenda this afternoon is to hear testimony regarding 35GL-20-2341. It's the Guam Environmental Protection Agency transmittal to Ilas Laturan Guahan, proposed rules and regulations pursuant to the administrative adjudication law. The committee will continue to receive testimony until 4 p.m. on November 13th, Friday. And please address testimony to Senator Sabina Perez, Committee Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement. It can be dropped off the mailboxes or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. So most of you are very familiar with the public hearing process, but just for those that may not be too familiar, I'm going to go over the rules of conduct. So the host will mute all participants until called upon by the chair, and virtual background should not be utilized during these hearings, and the participant's face must be visible at all times. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted and that you're speaking into your microphone. Members of the committee wishing to speak may indicate their desire to do so on the in-app chat feature. The order of questioning would be upon order of request. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted, and any violations of this general rule of conduct will result in the removal from the public hearing by the host. All right, so now to begin our agenda, the first item is Bill number 405-35 COR, sponsored by Senator Regine Visco-Lee. It's an act relative to establishing a task force to explore the feasibility of creating a groundwater conservation area on select government of Guam properties, which overlay a portion of the Northern Guam Lands Aquifer, wherein no production wells shall be installed and no development shall occur. I would like to allow the sponsor to provide some introduction remarks. Senator Regine Visco-Lee, you have the floor.
Hafide Todas Hamdu, and thank you very much, Madam Chair, for convening this public hearing on a measure that is part of an agenda, a legislative vision that is focused on securing our environment and our economy, both today and for generations to come. Bill number 405-35 COR is one of 4 bills that seeks to protect the Northern Guam Lands Aquifer, or NGLA, a precious resource that took millions of years to form and continues to provide our island's drinking water supply, sustaining lives and livelihoods for centuries. I'd like to thank our partners in drafting these measures, the team at the Water and Environmental Research Institute of the Western Pacific, or WERI, led by Dr. John Jensen and Dr. Nathan Habana, and the team at the Guam Waterworks Authority, the Guam Environmental Protection Agency, and Director Jack Hattig at the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, as well as the NGLA Technical Advisory Group. Madam Chair, Bill 405 takes the first step in the creation of conservation areas on Guam properties over the NGLA by establishing a task force composed of experts and officials. The task force would be charged to study which areas need the most protection the best regulation practices over the NGLA, and potential land use restrictions. In a previous hearing on a companion bill, stakeholders from the real estate community expressed their desires for further studies on the NGLA to produce more data on sources of contamination and potential causes of aquifer pollution. This measure is a direct response to calls from many in our community, including both landowners and conservationists, to update our strategic plans for this massive portion of our island and to provide a framework for all involved in land development to follow in the future. And I submit, Madam Chair, that it is our intent that the task force should have the flexibility to explore a wide range of possible models for regulation of development over the aquifer. And the feasibility study provides such flexibility for the task force to assess other aspects and models. I'm looking forward to amending the bill in committee to allow for changes that will adjust the language from absolute prohibition and preserve a merit of the concept of groundwater conservation areas, that these properties can provide the very places to install wells that are of optimum quality and sustainable production. I wanted to provide the distinction in developments over the NGLA. We want to look into restricting, regulating, and managing developments that may lead to further contamination of the aquifer, not the development of production wells. And for the record, Madam Chair, this measure does not call for any specific prohibitions, restrictions, or reforms to our current law. I'll repeat, this measure does not call for any specific prohibitions, restrictions, or reforms to our current law. It merely empowers our experts and our stakeholders to make these recommendations and submit back to this body for further consideration and action. But it is my hope that Bill 405-35, as a result of Bill 405-35, Guam can establish new public parks, green spaces, conservation areas, and research zones that will not only preserve our aquifer for centuries ahead, but also open new and exciting funding and investment opportunities in the near future. Tizuus Masi.
All right, thank you, Senator Lee. So now I would like to invite those that have come here to testify. We have Christine Fahren from Department of Agriculture. So you have the floor, Christine, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Welcome. Good afternoon, Senators, everyone present. So I do have a formal testimony to deliver. Fortunately, our director had conflicting times. So on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, thank you for the opportunity to provide written testimony on Bill number 405-35. And then, of course, you'd already defined the act. This bill complements Guam's Forest Action Plan, which describes water quality and water supply as one of our key issues to protect. Threats to our water supply include land clearing practices for the expansion of development, the pervasive threat of threats to our water supply, which include land clearing practices for the expansion of development, the pervasive threat of invasive flora and fauna species, and approximately 4.8% of our total land area burned annually by human-caused wildfires. Every effort is necessary to protect our northern Guam lands aquifer. This bill will support and complement two previous bills that were introduced in February 2020 by Senator Clint Rigel and you yourself, Senator Perez. These bills, which propose conservation areas for the Guam forest system, Bills number 291-35 and Bill number 292-35. These bills are currently sitting with Senator Terlahi's committee awaiting public hearing. So hopefully we'll see these two bills. Hopefully they'll be heard before the end of the term. But we have nearly $2 million in Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program funding available, which would fund restoration of these conservation areas if they are allowed to be under our jurisdiction. Although these bills identify parcels located in southern Guam and not over the NGLA at this point, they are conservation areas in important watersheds. We are sure that you will agree work over watersheds is as important to a secure and sustainable island as it is conservation over the NGLA. It is the intent of our agency and natural resource partners to expand upon the proposed sites to include Northern Guam parcels, which would further support efforts to protect and enhance portions of the NGLA. We hope that as soon as we can have a public hearing for Bills 291 and 292, we can work with you, our ecosystem conscious senators, to introduce legislation to establish conservation areas over the NGLA and incorporate these into the Guam forest system. So the Department of Agriculture understands the intent of Bill number 405-35 and fully supports its proposal. The proposed bill is consistent with the division's mission to conserve, protect, and enhance Guam's vegetative environment and sustain the natural resources which are dependent on healthy forests. So any questions, you can pose them to myself or our director. And I apologize, I think I forgot protocol here. My name is Christine Camacho Fahren. I am the division chief for Forestry and Soil Resources Division for the Guam Department of Agriculture. My apologies.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Christine. Always great to have you at these public hearings. And thank you for your testimony. Now I'd like to recognize another one who's no stranger to the environmental causes, Maneka de Oro. You have the floor to present your testimony.
Buenas, Hafade. Thank you, Sabina, Senator Sabina Perez. My name is Muñeca de Oro. I am the Just Transition Curriculum Policy Fellow, that's a lot, at Micronesia Climate Change Alliance, or MCCA, which is a 501c3 grassroots nonprofit dedicated to creating community-based solutions and building regional resilience in the face of climate change. Today, I'm here to speak on this bill, 405-35, as well as give thanks to the writers for providing different strategies in protecting the northern Guam lens aquifer. So water is life. It's necessary for the survival of all living organisms on Earth, which is why it's imperative that we protect our natural resources. Bill 405-35 brings measures that promote a healthy environment for our island, its people, and the future. In regards to 405-35, MCCA supports the need for a feasibility study and the initiation of a task force for a possible conservation area to protect our precious water resource. This legislation is important as it seeks to pace development in a way that is sustainable. For far too long, our island has prioritized development at the expense of our environment, especially in Northern Guam, where more than half of our residents live. We also want to continue to advocate that this possible task force, if the law is enacted, have more oversight of military lands and their activities that impact our aquifer, especially given the historic legacy of toxicity and environmental harm, and given in light that there will be an increase of heavy artillery weapons training in Tailalu and Finagazan, or what is also known as Northwest Field and NICTAMS. So groundwater conservation is incredibly essential, and there needs to be a wide variety of strategies at work in ensuring that our water is clean and flowing and is available for generations to come. MCCA as an organization consistently advocates for justice, equity, and for the environmental protection, and we are in support of Bill 405-35, and we want to express gratitude to Senator Regine Bisco-Lee and her office and their commitment to protect our freshwater resources, especially in the other pending bills, 404-35, 406-35, and 407-35. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Maneka, for taking the time to present testimony. And the other testimony we received today was from the Lieutenant Governor. So I was asked to read it, which I agreed to, of course. So it's regarding testimony for Bill 405-35. Dear Honorable Senator Perez, Hafaday and Siduas Maasi for accepting this written testimony in support of Bill 405-35, an act relative to establishing a task force to explore the feasibility of creating a groundwater conservation area on select government of Guam properties, which overlay a portion of the Northern Guam lens aquifer, wherein no production wells shall be installed and no development shall occur. Bill 405-35 proposes to add protection to Guam's natural freshwater lens. I've spoken with the author of the legislation, Senator Regina Scoli, and agree with the intent to determine the feasibility of a groundwater conservation area. As a chairperson of the Island Beautification Task Force and being involved with Guam Green Growth Initiative, I am a proponent for researching and discovering different ways to preserve our natural resources. I fully support Bill 405-35 and would be happy to lead the task force mandated by this legislation. Thank you again for the opportunity to lend support to this bill. Sincere mentee, Joshua F. Tenorio. Segundo Magalahan Guahan. So that's the testimony. And I believe Dr. Jensen is on his way. Is he? Yeah, or if he doesn't make it, he can always present or provide written testimony. But I see we do have
That is
to present any testimony.
Well, Dr. Jensen was the one that who wanted to come and talk about this. He's had communicated with Miguel Bordallo about this legislation, and we were gonna hear what he had to. I was expecting to hear what he would have to say for today, because I wasn't in on that conversation of recent and concerning this bill. But he wanted me to concur with what Miguel Bordallo had was supposed to come in here to say, and I don't know what had happened to that one.
Okay.
But and another thing I forgot to say is that Dr. Jensen is going to be delayed because he has to settle some personnel issue right now with HRO. And so he's just going to be delayed a little bit. But I was hoping we would hear what Miguel Bordallo or whoever his representative was going to say.
So I think we did reach out to a couple of stakeholders. Let me just pull that up if I can. Yeah, so we did reach out to all the members that were on the bill, Guam EPA, GWA, BSP, Department of Land Management, CLTC, Guam and Central Lands Commission, WERI, which is you, Lieutenant Governor's Office, UOGCIS, Micronesian Conservation Coalition, which is here, and Mallory Morgan also. So yeah, we would definitely continue to reach out if they have any testimony that they would like to provide regarding this bill. So I think we're going to have to move on if there's no further testimony at this time. I guess,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm hoping that if I could get him to say something. Let me see if I could get him from his office. He's really caught off guard with the timing, and he's just been so busy. But let me see if I could go grab him real quick, and I'll let you know. I'll try to bring him in here.
We could be in recess for 5 minutes then.
Please.
Okay, so we'll be in recess for 5 minutes and we'll come back.
Okay, thank you.
The Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement is back from recess, and so we do have some testimony from that we shared by Dr. Habana regarding Bill 405. So you're recognized, Dr. Habana. You're still muted. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for the break. You know, I just got back with Dr. Jensen. He agrees with what GWA stands on on this bill now. But he is concerned about the line 13 to 14, the prohibiting the installation of production wells on these same properties. With that, if it so happens that it could be located in a very good place to put wells, in that case, I was thinking that also with him that, you know, the land practice on is just to be very careful with what you do or near the wells, with some of the GIPA laws already exist. So he just would like to request that it be edited for that line item, where the prohibiting wells. It might be sitting on a very good place for wells, like the parabasal zone, for example. And so putting a well is there, and they have existing 1,000 feet rule around the well with GIPA. And other than that, he also had talked with this GWA and what's his name, Miguel Bordallo, and he agrees to what they have plans for that. He'll be in 20 minutes to add also. He's wrapping it up over there, from the time I requested or were given a break.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Bana, but we might have to move on in the agenda. There's another item on the agenda, but yeah, he's definitely welcome to provide written testimony. Yeah, because we might be in the middle of a different topic.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, that's my experience when, you know, in the States, they usually have these conservation areas where they're drawing water from, which makes logical sense.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, exactly. Senator, in areas, that's what he's arguing about. Like we went to Utah, there's a conservation area for groundwater, only for wells to be placed in there, and nobody else can, just like you're saying. That's exactly his stance.
Right. Yeah, and I guess there are other questions too. Unfortunately, at BSP, it'd be interesting to see how they weigh in on this, because they are the ones that oversee the land use policies, and it'd be great to get that coordination, you know, that collective information, because I think, yeah, this is a very complex situation where you have, you know, people living above their water resource, and then you have all these, property owners that want to develop their own properties, and you know, how do you balance all of these things? And I think, yeah, it's important to have that conversation. And I guess too, the question is, you know, regarding other types of land use. So for instance, you know, agriculture, right? You know, the northern Guam there's a lot of farms in the north as well, and you know, the impacts of that too. So that's a consideration in addition to, you know, living on top of the aquifer. You know,
Yes.
Add to concentrations of pollutants. But yeah, I think definitely getting some conversation about the usage and the impacts. I think it's great to increase that awareness. The other thing is like mineral extraction, right? So what is that going to be a part of the discussion here as well? I mean, that's something that's important. Which properties are being eyed, so to speak? So yeah, all of these can come out in the conversation. All right. So
Yes.
oh, go ahead.
One thing we've also learned from being out in the field and working with the drillers and the challenges we face with groundwater production. Sometimes we don't know the way this aquifer is designed, that you don't know that this area could be, it could be a dud, or it could be the best, the gold that were in water,
Mhm.
High quality water and high quantity. So, well, one that I can really say is that we've seen in our studies that the parabasal zone, if any of these areas are in that ribbon, the parabasal zone, which is we call the sweet spot of the aquifer, most inland and underneath, there's no saltwater intrusion. We think that's one of the best parts to target production wells and to place wells. And so if it happens that the land happens to be there, that we just want to keep that open, because if it was a bad idea anyways in the first place, we'd know not to put wells. But if it turns out to be a good idea, it might be a good to have that kind of option decision as well, and then place in the protection around it, regulations around that.
Right.
So that's the thinking behind that, the idea behind that. But
Okay.
I see where they were trying to do what was written was trying to do. But Dr. Jensen brings up a good point.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Banna.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, so I think we don't have anybody else to testify. I would just like to give the floor to the sponsor of the bill, if she would like to provide any closing statements.
Actually, Madam Chair, if I may, I just have a few questions for folks who've provided testimony this afternoon.
Sure.
Well, first off, I just want to say Sudusmasi to our stakeholders who have joined us this afternoon, and for giving their input and their support for this bill. Miss Christine Fahren from Department of Agriculture had mentioned their support for Bill 405, as well as support for Senator Rigel's Bill 291 and your bill, Madam Chair, 292, that might be stuck in another committee. And so I just want to reiterate my gratitude to you, Madam Chair, for hearing this bill and for allowing our community and the stakeholders to have an opportunity to discuss it. That's a really important part of our process. So I really want to thank you. But I do want to ask Ms. Fahren if she would, I heard in her testimony just her mention about federal grant opportunities in the conservation areas. And so I just wanted to give her an opportunity to expound on that a little bit more and maybe tell the committee what might be available to the people of Guam.
Okay, yeah, sure. Christine, you're still muted, so I don't know if you know that.
Gotta redo it. I did reference the REPI funding, which for anyone who missed that, it's the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program funding. And so it's REPI. And so REPI funds are typically tied to DOD activities, right? And this is not mitigation money. So it's not mitigation money. It's money for enhancement of the resources. And so that is available for us here. It's already been awarded, and it's happening. and having access and the authority to do work on these Gov Guam parcels, if we do get these as conservation areas, we can continue to do the great work we do all across the island and enforce even more effort. Enforce meaning just having more resources available, I should say, to be able to best tackle using best management practices, enforce management, enhancement, maybe reducing invasive species presence and incursions within our green spaces, protecting those green spaces, and recovering those abandoned parks, as Senator Lee mentioned. It's, you know, recovering the green spaces that have gone to illegal dumping and all kinds of other misuses. But in addition to federal funding, we also have the Forest Legacy program with the USDA Forest Service. So I'll speak specifically on our Forest Service funding that's available. So the Forest Legacy Act it's already law. Oh, sorry, I should have that in front of me. But what Forest Legacy provides us are more resources to basically enhance those existing green spaces. But it's property that's under our management. So that's why it's so key to move forward with Legacy, with the forest system, because it takes us those steps closer to the funding that will help us do more, get more done for Guam. In addition, there's the landscape scale restoration grants. So LSR, we've already proven success with LSR. The Maritzo projects, the Manel-Gayos watershed projects, those are big. And they started off small as pilot projects to show the community that you can drive down south now and see forest. It's happening. And it's something that the community can actually see, they can get to. And it's just so expanding that footprint. We've been able to do that with our forest landscape scale restoration grants. And then in addition, we still have our state and private grants, and not to mention also the fire program grants. And so there are various opportunities for us to move forward here. It's just having the authority to make the management decisions for these very important green spaces, protecting what we have, enhancing those spots, and in turn, the overall benefit to the community, right? Clean water. And clean water goes a long way, whether it's on a ridge or through the aquifer, then through the streams, through the rivers, through the village, out to the bay. There's a full connection here, and it all starts with a tree.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Fahren, for bringing that to light. You know, there are so many other resources that we can potentially tap into and really, like you mentioned, enhance our green spaces. So I really appreciate those points. And I want to thank MCCA for mentioning that water is life. I think that's the real our real focus behind these bills and making sure that we protect our NGLA, protect this resource. I also want to thank Dr. Habana for his time, and Dr. Jensen and the researchers and the team at WERI for their support. And we're looking forward to their written testimony as well as written testimony from GWA on this measure. And Madam Chair, thank you so much for reading the Lieutenant Governor's testimony as well. And I want to take the time to thank him for his support of this bill. Madam Chair, just in closing, I wanted to reiterate that our government must continue to tap into these local experts to better plan for our aquifer's future. And that's really the goal behind these bills. That's the goal behind Bill 405-35, which again establishes this task force to inform our land use decisions over the NGLA by exploring the establishment of potential groundwater conservation areas. And we have to be able to come together and figure out what uses will help our island and what types of development should be either restricted or further regulated on these properties. And again, this bill still requires legislative action on recommendations that are made by this task force should the bill pass. And I will certainly work with the committee chair to clarify the language that Dr. Habana brought up, that the aim of this feasibility study is not expressly to prohibit additional construction of drinking water wells in recognition of what WERI has expressed about these appropriate sites for safe and sustainable water production above the NGLA, precisely because these properties are designated as conservation areas. And I think this measure has so much positive potential. Policies that are resulting from this group's work could lead to the creation of new public parks, new research programs. And again, I just want to mention the Department of Agriculture. In their testimony, they told us about millions that are already available to invest into recognized conservation areas. I do want to just close, Madam Chair, by mentioning, and I've said this in a previous public hearing, but our aquifer is not invincible. The NGLA contains the healthiest and most valuable groundwater for the island. And every action that we take over this gifted resource has the potential to put a dent in our proverbial armor. And I've been saying this again repeatedly, but our aquifer is too important to ignore. It supplies nearly 80% of our drinking water. It will be the reason that Guam has grown to where we are today, and it will sustain us into the future if we commit ourselves today, if we commit to enacting every protection that we can, and by supporting expert-driven decisions, data-driven decisions, solutions that are backed by science. And so again, I just want to thank all of our stakeholders, and I really want to give kudos to you, Madam Chair, for giving us the space to discuss this bill, and all of the stakeholders who've provided testimony today.
You're very welcome, Senator Lee. And you know, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and something that I've been really looking after for over a decade. Oh, and there's Mr. Dr. Jensen, great. Yeah, so this is something near and dear to my heart. You know, I think if we're looking at the NGLA, we need to look at its entirety and not just the government of Guam lands. And as you know, prior to becoming senator, you know, I was fighting for protection of our aquifer, you know, regarding the Tailalo area. And yeah, I just hope that we can look at all lands and all things that can impact our resource. Whether it's, you know, regards to, you know, building a house or mineral extraction or anything, right? Anything can affect or pollute, contaminate our resource. And, you know, we definitely need to be more mindful and leave a smaller footprint, you know, ecological footprint, because it's not just for us, but for future generations. And I'm sure all of you here are, you know, for that cause. But on that note, Dr. Jensen, thank you for coming. We were about to move on to the next item, but you know, I'm really happy that you made it. So yeah, if you're ready to provide testimony, we're ready for you.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Yeah, I'll just keep it short. I think it's a great concept to have groundwater reserves, and I would highly advise that you make it a high priority to have these reserves positioned so that you can install groundwater wells on those reserves and tap the water that is available in a protected area. Given that the whole idea is to have a protected zone, you want to be able to put in a well. For instance, if you got, I'm sorry, I'm not a little more articulate, I'm talking off the top of my head, but you know, ideally, if you had one of these reserves in one of the best parts of the aquifer in the parabasal zone, you'd want to be able to put in a well where you get 750 gallons a minute, and of the best water you can, and it's not vulnerable to saltwater intrusion. You want to be able to optimize the production out of the aquifer, and this would be an opportunity to do that. So I would just advise that you include the provision to develop wells inside these as opposed to prohibiting wells. But other than that, I think the concept is great.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I say one thing, Senator Perez, Madam Chair? You know, we have someplace to go. You needed me to go?
Yeah, excuse me. I'm covering 2 meetings. I've got a personnel meeting with some of my weary people that were making some personnel decisions on that I need to excuse myself to and take Dr. Devana with me. We're moving.
Sorry. Please excuse us.
He'll be back, and I'll be back eventually. But I just I've got two 2:00 meetings that I couldn't get out.
I'll just mute and shut my video.
Yeah, no worries. You're always welcome to provide written testimony in case you miss some points. But it's good to see you guys are social distancing.
Thank you.
Sorry, did you want to
Okay.
add anything else, Dr. Banner? Thank you, Dr. Jensen.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute and keep up the good work.
You're welcome. Thanks. Okay, I guess they both are leaving. All right, Dr. Banner, did you want to add one more point? Okay, I guess not. All right, so I think that concludes the portion of this agenda. We will be moving on to the next portion of the agenda, but I need to recess because Guam EPA, I need to contact them again regarding who's going to present. So thank you again, Christine, for being here. You're becoming a regular. And thank you to Senator Regina Biscali and Weary for providing testimony, and to the Lieutenant Governor as well. So thank you, everybody. And we're going to be in recess. Masi. Today, the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement is now back from recess. I've been just informed that Guam EPA has asked to reschedule the hearing for the rules and regs for the underground storage tanks. And we'll be rescheduling that at another time in this month, hopefully. And so at this point, we are going to adjourn this virtual hearing. Just as a reminder for those that would like to provide written testimony, the committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. on Friday, November 13th, 2020. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement regarding Bill 405-35, also Bill 276-35 from this morning, and Bill 386-35. It should be addressed to Senator Sabina Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement. It can be dropped off the mailboxes, but preferably to be emailed to the office at senatorperez.org. The time now is 3:05 p.m. We are now adjourning this public hearing. Sedus Masi.